This week on Writers, Inc.
I personally have never worked in the true crime genre. I've mostly been a TV writer, a sitcom writer, always working in fiction. The only thing I did when I was younger was work in a few documentaries where we were not dealing with crime elements, but we were dealing with real people's life. And there is a serious responsibility of, if you're filming people and then you're going to translate their story to the screen, do you owe them anything of framing them positively or cutting out something that could be problematic? And that feels like it's a really blurred line between documentarian and storyteller. And that's the gray area I wanted to live in.
J.K. Rowling was nearly homeless when she wrote the first Harry Potter book. Stephen King penned Carrie in a small desk wedged between a washer and dryer. James Patterson worked in advertising and famously crafted the Toys R Us theme song long before becoming an author. Join New York Times bestseller JD&x and a panel of industry powerhouses as they pull back the curtain on some of the world's most prolific authors. Where did they start? What is their process? The biggest names in publishing all have origin stories. All have tips and secrets. What does it take to consistently top the bestseller lists and become a household name? Get your notepad out. School's in session. This is Writers, Inc.
Hi, it's Christine Daigle.
Patrick O'Donnell.
JP Rindfleisch.
JD&x. Wait, no. Kevin Tumlinson.
Yeah, JD is away again.
Yeah, we're sans JD.
There you go. I think we'll survive.
But at least I made it this time.
Yeah.
You did.
And
you're
I was
here.
trying to make
Hello.
it last time. I couldn't get into my room, so I couldn't record with you guys. That's
Darn
an ink
hotel
story.
keys. Yeah. Oh, so what's going on this week? Anyone have anything exciting they want to talk about?
JP.
I do.
Go for it.
Go ahead, JP.
I am teaming up with Jeff Elkins, the Dialogue Doctor, and we are doing something called Dialogue Dash. So starting October 1st for 78 days, we'll be planning for 31 days, writing for 30 days during a convenient time of the year, and then editing the last 2 weeks or 17 days. We've got a really cool workbook that we're forming for the entire project. And then we also have webinars, and during the writing phase, we have daily, affirmations or whatever you want to call them. But regardless, it's basically a way for you to plan, write, and edit your novel. And anyone can join regardless of if you have nothing started or if you have something started. I feel like you'll be able to get something out of it. You can check out more at dialoguedoctor.com.
Very cool.
Is this in conjunction with NaNoWriMo?
Yeah, as I'm going to say, no coincidence. It's in
I
November.
can't say that, but it is oddly convenient timing, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Huh.
Very convenient.
And as a side note, it's 78 days, $78 or $1 a day. So
Fun times.
Can they pay you $1 a day? Can they just? Here's
I
$1.
am not taking care of
See
the
you
money
tomorrow.
for
Okay.
that reason. They can hash that out with Jeff if they would like to.
Awesome.
Okay. Very cool. That sounds
All right.
That sounds cool.
Yeah.
It does. Yeah, I was
Well,
lucky
if you-
enough last week to talk to a college class, be a guest lecturer.
Oh, that's
I've done
fun.
that a few
Ooh.
times.
Oh,
Have you guys ever gone to school and talked to the kids,
yeah.
quote
Yeah.
unquote?
Well, I used to teach, so yeah. Like I used to teach.
Well, I mean, like,
Well, beyond the teaching,
this-
University.
I also taught, but no, I
Yes.
used to get invited. Maybe not as I don't know why I don't get invited anymore, but I mean, maybe this is a bad thing. But I used to get invited all the time.
ever since
to
the
go talk
incident.
to schools. Ever since the incident,
Ever since that
One
we
of the funny-
will not speak of. We will not speak of.
In my early days, I had one of the first things one of the first 2 series I published was a sort of YA fantasy series, and the first book was called Sawyer Jackson and the Long Land. But unbeknownst to me, there was a typo on the spine of that book, and it was Sawyer Jackson and the Long Lond, LOND. And here I am doing this talk in front of all these high school kids and telling you can write, anybody can write, and just make sure you're paying attention. Just editing is important, etc. And so everybody started to point out that there was a typo on the spine of the book.
Ouch.
And that's when you use that as a moment. Editing
And that-
is important. See
This
what
is
That's
happens
right.
when you
Important.
don't.
This is a
Yeah,
teaching moment.
teachable
It's all
moment.
Teaching
planned.
moment. Yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a lot of fun. Thanks, Professor Walsh and his class for having me. Good times.
Awesome. All right, JP, what's in the news?
All right, number one in the news, Hollywood writers reach tentative deal to end the strike.
Yay.
So the Writers Guild of America reached a tentative agreement with studios, potentially ending the 140-plus day Hollywood writers strike. WGA said the deal includes meaningful gains for writers across sectors, but details can't be shared yet. It focuses on issues like better streaming residuals, protecting writers' rooms, and limiting AI writing. So, yay.
Yeah. Wait, there was a writer's strike?
Oh.
No,
I'm just hoping
I'm
the
kidding.
quality of Hollywood
Get
writing
out.
goes up because, God, I don't know how can you rehash and retell the same story over and over and over and over.
People love it. That's how you do it.
Ugh,
So,
not
Yeah.
me.
yeah. But I am curious to see what's in that contract, to see what AI
True.
clauses are going to look like. So I'm glad they're
Yeah.
back.
I am interested in that, but I'm almost more interested to see what they ended up coming up to with the streaming residuals, because that was actually kind of surprising to me that was even a thing. But it's not just the writers. I remember during the pandemic, they brought Black Widow out on Disney Plus, and I can't remember her name, the actress. What's her name?
This is Scarlett Johansson.
The main
Scarlett
actress,
Johansson?
Scarlett Johansson.
Yeah.
Thank you. She got royally screwed by that whole deal. And so I'm really curious to see, because SAG-AFTRA was also part of this strike. So
Yeah.
I really want to see what the outcome of that was.
No, yeah, and I don't know
Agreed.
a lot about I know in movies, I am not a financial person, so this is just from talking to other writers that they'll get deals like when the movie makes money, you'll make money, but they do it in such a way so they always don't make money. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they do some creative accounting, so writers often don't get paid. Yeah, I'd like to see what happens with that. So.
Well, I'm curious to see, since
me
it's
too. Cool.
like streaming residuals. What about musicians? If there's a
Yeah.
precedent here, and it's like, hey, you know what, they got this. You might have musicians saying, "How come I'm getting screwed? I'm getting paid pennies for streaming residuals."
I don't know though. The music industry, they've had some of this kind of stuff sewn up for a long time.
Yeah.
I mean, look at the whole deal with you can't mention lyrics in a book without having to pay huge fees to the person who wrote that song.
Yeah, but the musician
right?
doesn't get that money.
They've pretty much got their game together.
Right, but the musician doesn't get that money.
I don't
The
know.
only way you make money in music now is to tour. It's not like the old days where like album sales were a big part of it. Now it's
Well, I think it's different with the licensing though.
No, maybe it is.
They're ahead of publishing usually in
Yeah.
many ways.
Yeah, and I mean,
so
I remember there was, if I'm not mistaken, and I could be, there was a pretty big deal that Kate Bush got for Stranger Things.
That's
So,
right.
I mean, they clearly are getting money for their music getting played. So
Can I
I
ask-
don't know.
Did any
What?
of you know that song before Stranger Things? 'Cause
Absolutely
I
not.
haven't heard that song in my life. You
Yeah.
did, Christine?
I did.
Yeah. Was that your jam?
No, but my husband is a weird, like a music weirdo. He's like an aficionado and has all this stuff. And I have heard that song like a million times. So when they played it on Stranger Things, I'm like, huh. And my husband's like, see, I'm cooler than you thought. It was just like when they played the Cramps Goo Goo Mosh on Wednesday. I'm like, my husband plays this weird crap at home. And now it's showing up in shows. So, it was pretty cool.
Man, I've never felt older in my entire life.
Your husband is a trendsetter. That's
Yeah.
I
all.
didn't know these.
There you go.
Next in the
You
news.
kids and your
Next in the
modern
news.
throwback
They're
music.
new.
We're moving forward,
new
Kevin.
Fandango music.
All right, I'm letting it go.
Have some
All
Bucky
right,
Nuggies.
next up, state of the publishing or state of the printing industry. Book printing is facing rising paper costs with a projected 3% annual decline in supply and labor shortages requiring premiums for off-hour shifts. So that entangled with environmental sustainability becoming a priority with publishers like Penguin Random House pledging carbon neutrality. And then the forecasting print runs are just difficult. We have speakers acknowledging merits in debating overprinting to chase sales versus controlling costs through better communication. So all in all, it seems like digital printing accounted for 25% of pages in 2022 and is forecasted to reach 39% by 2028 through offset printing. though offset printing will still dominate for many years. So just interesting state of the printing industry.
I know from our little slice of inside that some of these printers are starting to use a different, a less expensive version of the paper that's all mostly recyclable content and that sort of thing. And the results have been mixed, but I think they're getting better at figuring out how to make it quality. There was a lot of early on, they were switching to like recycled, repurposed paper, and they would have a lot of problems with the quality of it, like it practically disintegrating, things like that. But so, yeah, it's interesting to see this.
Yeah.
That's it. I'm the only one who had anything to say about.
Yeah, I was like, I've been thinking about it, but I'm like, I have nothing to add. Is it going to go more digital? No. Are they going to find paper alternatives? Probably not. So,
Yeah.
I wish there was. I don't even know if there were more tools to make ebook versions as gorgeous as some of the print versions that I like to do, because I really like to make my print versions like as beautiful as I can. But there are still limits that happen with the ebook, and I would love to see some more improvements there, especially because I do think digital is the way to go. I mean, I read digital, but I really like when there is a well-crafted paperback. So it's tough.
Yeah.
Isn't that what EPUB 3 is supposed to be about, though? Like it's adding more, formatting and things.
I hope so. That sounds lovely.
Yeah.
I'm one of those people who reads digital, but then if I love a book and I see a beautiful version of it, I also buy it in paper.
Yes.
Yeah.
See,
that's what Seth Godin said, that if you're in the book business, you're actually in the souvenir business.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah. Sorry, Patrick.
No, I start out with audio, and if I really, really like the book, then I buy the paperback or a hardcover just to have it. Or if it's like a nonfiction and there's stuff in there that I'm going to be referencing, then I definitely get the paperback.
Yeah. I think I'm very ebook first at this point. I still buy paperbacks and things. I have stacks of them that I'm reading right now, but because I travel so much, ebook, it's very difficult to carry like 1,500 paperbacks with you when you're boarding a plane.
That is
challenging.
The pilot might have a problem with 1,500 books getting yes.
Last up in the news, judge officially blocks Texas book rating law. So the law had originally required book vendors to rate books for schools under vague community standards and banned sexually explicit titles. However, the judge blocked that rating, HB 900, calling it unconstitutional and an infringement on the First Amendment. So they criticized the law for outsourcing ratings to vendors while letting the state override them, calling it compelled speech. And the ruling follows lawsuits in other states challenging new laws that restrict books in schools under the guise of parental rights.
I do have to say, I do think the idea of some sort of book rating system isn't a terrible idea, but when it's politicized as a weapon, that's when it's problematic, and that's what they were. As the native Texan here, I'm just going to say I even acknowledge that this was something aimed at something different than what they claimed it was for. That's what it feels like.
Yeah. Well, it was just impossible to do, right? So you can't be like, here, do this impossible thing, and now you can't sell books, right? That's not
do this impossible thing. It's all on you, but we're going to override it if we don't like what we see.
Correct.
Exactly. Yeah, I've thought the same thing too, though. Like we have TV shows and movies with explicit ratings, and they have here are the guidelines on why these ratings work. Correct. And I would love to see that for certain books because that's helpful regardless. Yeah. But I think in this case, no.
But see, there's a use case there, right? Because they could easily just take those guidelines and modify them as needed and apply them to books. But the real question is what happens because this is aimed at traditional publishing. So what about the indies? How do we would end up having to participate in this system? So I mean, it's got its problems. I do think that something like this should exist, but I don't trust any government to come up with the rules.
Fair enough.
This episode is brought to you by AutoCrit. One of the most value-packed memberships for any author, AutoCrit brings you an amazing suite of tools that make it a breeze to plan, write, and edit your books all in one place. Autocrit takes you far above standard grammar checking or cookie cutter guidance. Instead, it's like having an experienced editor in your genre watching over your shoulder to help you deliver great writing that keeps your audience trapped in the story. You can even compare your writing style to more than 100 best-selling authors right down to the word level, so you can see what the best in the business do to keep their storytelling clean, clear, and crisp. Listeners of the Writers Inc. podcast can now take advantage of lifetime membership for one single fee. That's right, no renewal fees.
Hi, this is JD&x. I've used AutoCrit for years, and not only has it improved my writing, but it's been a crucial tool with aspiring authors that I've mentored. Whether you're a seasoned pro or just beginning, it'll help you find your weak spots and weed them out. Give it a shot with your latest project. Trust me, your editor will thank you.
Head to autocrit.com/JD to get your lifetime membership. Big thanks to Autocrit for sponsoring the show.
All right. Up this week, it is Daniel Sweren-Becker. Daniel is an author, television writer, and playwright. His play Stress Positions premiered in New York City at the Soho Playhouse. He's the author of the novels The Once, The Equals, and his new novel, Kill Show. So here he is, Daniel Sweren-Becker. So you have a new book, Kill Show, which revolves around the disappearance of a 16-year-old girl and the Hollywood producer who turns the tragedy into entertainment. Correct. Do you want to tell listeners a bit about what to expect from the book?
Yeah, this was really my attempt to write a book about kind of the behind the scenes world of true crime. And it's a world that I was a little bit familiar with professionally, just being a TV writer. I'd worked in documentary before, but I was much more familiar with just being a fan of true crime. And I really wanted to expose what making this product, these entertainment products, the podcasts, the shows, the documentaries, how that impacts the people who make them and kind of the moral gray area that they have to live in and the personal repercussions they have to deal with. I feel like I had seen a lot of true crime, obviously, in that genre, but I hadn't seen anything exposing the lives of the people making it. And that felt like a really rich story area to pursue.
Yeah. So you just said that it's exploring like the morally gray areas of where entertainment meets violence. Why do you think so many people are obsessed with true crime?
Wow. I mean, I think it starts from some very basic facts about us, which is we love a spectacle, right? We are attracted to violence. We rubberneck on the highway when we see a car crash. Then you add in a lot of these true crime things are things that we wonder, could that happen to me, or how would I react if it happened to me? So it's kind of a safe way to get excited and project yourself into a scenario that you're actually safe from. I guess I'm describing being a voyeur. That's probably the academic word about it. So I think that's why so many of us are attracted. It's a safe way to feel excited about something.
So the scary kind of implication, I think you say it in your book too, like this could happen to you, but it didn't because you're luckier or smarter or more deserving.
Yeah, and I want to add one thing that I just forgot, which is I think there's an element of kind of Monday morning quarterbacking where a lot of these true crime things are about something that was mishandled. And it's really interesting for us to go back and both judge how it was mishandled or try to nitpick how and why it was mishandled. And some of them are just like obvious injustices where we're enraged about what's happened. And I think it's kind of trained us to look for the injustices in these situations. So it's both the sensational nature of it, which is just kind of exciting, and then a lot of our like judgmental attitude of wanting to go back and fix something that's been wrong.
So like, I would have done it this way, so I could have done a better job kind of thing. Or if I was in this situation, This is what I could do.
Or I wish we lived in a world where something like this didn't happen, and here's all the idiots who caused it to go the wrong way.
Yeah, that makes sense. How do you think we detach from the horrific facts of this to find this fascinating or entertaining?
Yeah, I think we do that a little too well, if I'm being honest, because specifically with true crime, we're detaching from something that actually happened to people. It was a real person, a real family's worst day of their life, worst week of their life. And we're using it as entertainment, which is a a really complicated thing I wanted to explore. When you ask, how do we do that? I mean, part of it is we know this thing already happened. That's a little bit of a relief. Part of it's we know it happened presumably far away from where we live. I'd be pretty scared if I was reading true crime about a serial killer in my neighborhood who hadn't been caught yet. But if it's a serial killer who was caught in the 1970s, I can sleep at night with my door unlocked. Right. So I think our logic just comes into play and allows us to detach. But I wish we all brought a little bit more perspective of these are real people. Maybe I should be feeling a little more empathetic about what's actually happened to them.
Yeah. So you bring that in with the audience, and then also examining how people do this professionally. Like, how do you sleep at night?
Yeah, I think it really asks the question of, like, if you're trying to make entertainment, are you also exploiting these people to cause that? And if you're earning a salary from it and your company's earning profits from it, who is being exploited to do that? Well, certainly there's cases where no one's being exploited, but I think there's many cases where real life people are being exploited. And to me, that is a tough thing to reconcile if you're making it, because so much of true crime is informative and it speaks to social issues that are really important to illuminate. But at the same time, as the producers, as I like to call them, seek out kind of the craziest stories, they are finding people who had something awful happen to them, taking that kernel of a story and using it to turn a profit. That, to me, feels exploitative on its face. So balancing those two things feels really complicated for the people doing it.
Yeah, I imagine. And did you find, like, were you taking jabs at yourself with this, or was this self-exploration, or how? Because that must get kind of complicated.
It's close to becoming pretty hypocritical. I personally have never worked in the true crime genre. I've mostly been a TV writer, a sitcom writer, always working in fiction. The only thing I did when I was younger was work in a few documentaries where we were not dealing with crime elements, but we were dealing with real people's life. And there is a serious responsibility of, if you're filming people and then you're going to translate their story to the screen, do you owe them anything of framing them positively or cutting out something that could be problematic? And that feels like it's a really blurred line between documentarian and storyteller. And that's the gray area I wanted to live in. And I don't think I have the perfect answer to it. I guess when you asked me if I'm nervous, was I taking a jab at myself? I think the safest way to not cross those lines is to just work in fiction, which is what I've done here. It's kind of a trick that I'm happy to be called out on. I'm writing about true crime, but making it all up. So you can't accuse me of ruining someone's actual life.
Absolutely.
So I'm considering myself safe, but someone else can call me out for it.
Did you worry at all about, like, your readers or what reaction you might get from the audience? Because you're asking them a little bit to examine themselves as well, because I imagine some of your readers probably love true crime.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And it's not that I was nervous about it, but I was aware that I'd be presenting some things that might make people feel some self-judgment. I think the way I avoided that feeling problematic is I'll raise my hand to be the first person to say, I'm the true crime fan. I'm the person who's paying money for this stuff, who wants more and more of it, who talks about it, in my circle of friends. So I'm just as guilty as anyone else. And it wasn't so much about accusing them of doing something wrong. I say them as the audience, but urging them to just reflect on the complexity of being a fan of this genre and hoping that they ask the questions of themselves instead of me accusing them.
Yeah. So kind of a little bit of, I thought it was interesting to think about, why is this so fascinating to us as humans? Because it's a very popular genre.
It worked on
right?
you. You asked the questions.
Absolutely. So yeah, that's cool.
And are you going to reduce any of your true crime consumption or change the way you do it?
I don't know. Okay. I'm not a huge true crime fanatic, but I do watch some of it, so I can steal it for fiction,
Sure. Yeah. Truth always better than fiction.
Yeah, but it did make me feel bad about it, if that helps.
Okay, no, I appreciate that it had a reaction. It wasn't hoping to make you feel bad per se, but a reaction is great.
Yeah, it was good, and it was good to think about. And I love books where you're still, like, thinking about this later and, like, yeah, why? I was thinking a lot about why is violence so okay with us? But if it had been this explicit with like sexual content, it would be like a whole other story, you know? So I was thinking about that a lot.
Yeah, no, it's uncomfortable. Like in some respects, we live in a very violent country, and in another perspective, we live in a very peaceful age and a peaceful country. I think that has numbed us to the fact that like we're not in the Middle Ages seeing violence like every 6 hours as we walk around the village. But maybe that makes it more acceptable to kind of go to fairy tale land and enjoy it as fiction because we're so far removed from it, hopefully, most of us in our normal lives.
Yeah, maybe a bit like Grimm's fairy tales. Like if I can take something moral out of this, although in true crimes, not everybody is safe at the end. So I don't know. It's a little different, I guess. All right, I'm going to let you out the hook on that one because I've asked a lot about it.
Thank you.
I want to ask some more about craft. So I want to talk about the format of your book because it was really interesting.
Yes.
You've done it all in an interview style with no exposition at all. And I loved how you used like the unreliability or subjective perspectives of the witnesses' memories to show that people remember events differently. They're really poor historians. They're inaccurate. Can you talk a little bit about your choice to use that narrative device?
No, this was the most fun part of writing this book. It's, as you kind of described, it's a fake oral history where I'm interspersing kind of the testimony of, I think, 26 different characters about a singular event. And it's 10 years later, and they are remembering their own version of the story. And using this format just allowed me to write this thing like a rocket ship. It was so much fun to be able to jump in and out of characters' perspectives, which I had maybe done in another novel before, but it was just two different characters alternating chapters. And the effect that this has is you get to know what the characters are thinking in such a natural way and feel so kind of connected to them without having to write that third person paragraph. That morning I woke up and I had this thought on my mind. And to me, of course, there's brilliant books written like that, and I can try that again, but that felt a little boring to me. And this was much more kind of conversational, natural, allowed readers to access the characters' minds in a way that I thought was much quicker. And then the coolest part as a writer is anytime you wanted to have one character be contradicted or another character to come in with a joke or a compliment or just kind of show the chemistry or what's going on between these two, I could just edit the thing however I wanted. Of course, it's fiction. Thank God I get to control that. And it just felt like such an easy way to control the rhythm and the flow of the story. And I have to give a shout out to Daisy Jones and the Six, which was the book that I read that used this fake oral history format. And I was so immersed in it so quickly. And I thought, wow, this would be so interesting to use in a different genre. And that's when I decided to apply this format to the true crime genre.
Cool. So you said you tried it a little bit before with two perspectives. Was that all just like dialogue as well with no paragraphs?
Yeah, that was just normal prose, like most conventional book. And the only way that was alternating was each chapter would be a different perspective. And you lose the moment-to-moment contradiction of that.
Right.
So I guess I'm now recognizing for the first time I had dabbled in trying to manipulate POV, but this was like going to the extreme where 26 POVs changing every quarter of a page.
Yeah, I thought that was so cool. So you said it came from Daisy Jones and the Six. I was wondering if it came from any of your TV and film experience as well, because that's quite a sparse format in terms of description. And
I should say even before Daisy Jones, I was just personally obsessed with reading oral histories, but nonfiction ones. And, you know, the famous ones are like the Studs Terkel versions. I think he did the Depression and World War II and maybe Vietnam. And I find them to be such an interesting way to learn about something because you get the kind of the personal narratives, but thankfully you have someone in charge with the big picture narrative that's also shaping it. Yeah. And then I also love the ones that are much sillier, you know, the oral history of Saturday Night Live or the making of Dazed and Confused. And I find that those books are the ones I can read in a day or two. And when I saw Taylor Jenkins Reid do the novel form of it, I was like, oh, of course, people consume these so excitedly. let's put the novel form in it. They're going to tear through this novel. And then my experience working I worked for HBO Films right out of college making documentaries. And I don't know, I think there was something, I learned a lot about the craft of how complicated it is to really edit a documentary. You know, you interview 10 or 20 people, and then you're trying to tell a story, and it's just making this jigsaw puzzle with all of their little blurbs and stuff, which is really hard when they're real people and you don't get to tell them what to say. So I was just relieved when I was doing my own fictional version that I could tell these people exactly what I needed them to say to end a chapter and wasn't relying on hopefully having it in the, the camera footage.
Yeah. So, being a writer and reading books, I think we have a bit of different experience than readers, because I was just like, there is no slow part in this book. Yeah. Everything is fast, which is what, you want when you're writing a thriller. So I'm like, what? An awesome technique.
No, the moment that it all clicked into place for me pacing wise, and it sounds so silly now, like kind of amateur hour, is I realized I was starting every chapter in the early drafts with something really exciting because I'd be kind of changing to a new topic. And I just thought to myself, if I take this singular passage at the beginning of the chapter and put it as the last part of the chapter before it, that's called a cliffhanger. And that leads to momentum, and people are going to want to keep reading this. So it was just moving up all those kind of the change of topic and teeing it up for the reader of what's coming next. And that allowed me to feel like this thing could really fly.
Yeah, it did fly. And I was kind of envious because I was speculating, and you can tell me if this is wrong, that anytime you get stuck with a character, you could just jump to another one.
Yes.
And I was like, that's amazing.
Yeah, and even better, you can jump to another one saying something really controversial about what the previous person had just said, and then you have conflict, then you have tension. It's like, oh, wow, these basic fundamentals of writing, I need to figure out how to use them in this format. But once I kind of got the hang of it, it was actually really easy to write.
Yeah. And I was also curious, did it help you explore or help the reader explore or empathize with perspectives that might be a little more difficult to swallow? Like, for example, you have like a conspiracy theorist who says, oh, this disappearance is just a Hiroshima event. Yeah. They're all fake, all these kids' disappearance.
I know that's a good question. I almost think the answer is no, but I get what you mean in the sense that I was nervous writing those sections because I realized I did have to do them in the first person. And those few characters are kind of loathsome people advocating for loathsome ideas. I think by that point in the book, you're just on board with the fact that we are going to hear everyone's internal testimony. So we have to hear some of the bad guys also. So I was nervous about doing that, but those end up being the most fun. Of course, like I know you've written plenty of books. When you're writing a villain or someone that you don't relate to, it does feel like you can really step outside yourself with like no consequence to write the craziest version of that. Mm-hmm. And so I did get excited writing that specific character.
Well, I thought you did a pretty balanced point of view for even those ones who might be considered more loathsome, because you're showing kind of both sides of it, which I thought was pretty neat.
Right.
Not that I shouldn't assume you're a conspiracy theorist. You might be. Everyone should.
I'm not.
Believe in a good conspiracy theory. So, I don't.
And again, it goes back to that thing. You can have someone say something truly awful and then have a second character come right in and say, this person's a monster. No one ever should listen to him. And then just get right back to that person going on and on.
Yeah. So after you've written this book in this style, I'm curious, and you've been examining this true crime obsession. What does it make you want to do next? Like, how do you think your next book might look or your craft might evolve?
No, I have to admit that as I was writing this book, I was saying to myself, I don't want to ever write a novel not in this style. I think it's just so much fun. I now have a couple ideas for new books that I just don't think would work like that. I mean, I guess part of using this style is writing about an event in the past. I don't think you could really use the oral history style for a contemporaneous thing that everyone's experiencing at that moment. I don't know exactly what I want to write next, but I think I've found a nice little sweet spot of like combining plot, tension, and narrative, with social commentary. And look, the social commentary in this book might be 4% of it, but for me, it was the most interesting thing to write, and the stuff I'd be thinking about when I went to sleep and excited to write the next day. So whatever I want to do next, I would love to be able to still marry those two possibilities of a tale that's exciting, but I'm also trying to say something about the world we live in.
Yeah. Excellent. I mean, even with your title, I'm like, oh, Kill Show, what is this going to be about? And it was like, not at all what I expect. I mean, it was surprising, but inevitable.
No, it's supposed to be a jarring title. And I got to give credit to my sister, who really invented that phrase when she was a little girl. She, you know, when my parents were watching TV and it was too violent and she wasn't allowed, she would say, is this a kill show? When can I watch a kill show? So she invented this title 30 years ago, and luckily it stuck in my head and I was able to use it again.
That's very cool. So is there anything that you learned from this process that you're going to take like right and hit the ground running with when you start your next book?
Oh, man. Maybe do an oral history again. I think the thing that I really want to take away from this is not to start writing until you are like fully energized and locked into what you know the story is. And I've tried to start books where I didn't have that energy and clarity. And to me, those are just like the two essential things, because once you have the energy and clarity, I can write every day, all day, essentially. But trying to write without that stuff is a fool's errand. And sometimes you get tricked into doing that. So I will say that process-wise, building up to get that clarity takes a lot of work. Like there's a chance I was thinking about the structure and story of this book for longer than I was doing the typing on the page.
Yeah.
And that allowed me to get to the typing where I could go much faster. But I think I need to keep that reminder of that work is so worth it, and just really never enter into something if you haven't been able to nail down that work first.
Absolutely. So do you do like a tagline or a synopsis, or what do you have before you get putting words on the page?
Yeah, I think I just start expanding from like, okay, I have a kernel of an idea. Mm-hmm. Now can I like summarize this in a paragraph? And maybe at that point, it's like I start thinking a little bit more professionally, where it's like, I'd like to show this to my agent, or I'd like to show this to an editor I know. How can I show this to them in a professional way? And I'll do a sizzle page, which is just basically like a one page, not exactly a summary, but like a one page. Here's what this book's about. Here's why I think it's exciting. Here's the themes it's exploring. And, you know, if you can write that sizzle page, you're pretty far along to like thinking you have something. And once you have that, to me, then it's just like a Google document where I wouldn't call it an outline just yet, but it's like almost just vomiting everything you know you want to do relatively in order, and just being like, oh, I know this person's going to say this line of dialogue here. I know this twist is coming here. I know this setting is going to be important for XYZ reasons. And once there's enough of that, that's really kind of informal, then I'll sit down and be like, okay, I think I can write like a proper outline of this, where it's like, chapter 1, here's what happens. Here's where it leads to. Chapter 2. And that document is many, many pages long. And that's kind of the holy grail. Like I always say that I'd like to write my outline so thoroughly that like if I got hit by a bus tomorrow, someone else could find my outline and essentially write the same exact novel. So that's kind of the A to Z of how I get it done.
I love that. I've always, thought that the synopsis is like the hardest part of the book.
That's the most work is figuring out all that stuff, and then you're filling in the blanks.
Yeah, and like, are other people excited about it? And if they're not, then I'm like, then I'm not excited about it. But I've never heard sizzle page. I love that. So
yeah, I think that's probably more of an industry term, and even a reality TV term of like it obviously has such a connotation of salesmanship to it, which I almost want to embrace even as I roll my eyes about it. But like at some point, salesmanship needs to come into this. The publishers need to sell the book, and you need to sell the book to the publishers. So embrace that and write a hell of a sizzle page. It's worth it.
That's awesome. It just sounds so exciting. That sizzle page. That just makes me more excited.
It doesn't sound like homework when you have the word sizzle.
It doesn't. Awesome. Great. So we're kind of running out of time. So I wanted to ask you one question. And
sure.
If you don't want to answer it, that's okay. But I was just curious. If you could offer one piece of advice to true crime writers, what would it be?
So the advice I would offer is find two stories that don't seem obviously connected and combine them. So of course there are tragedies happening all around the world, but usually they're connected to a larger social, cultural, political thing. And that to me is where the interesting story really is, when we find the tragedy, but we identify what it's really a part of or what it's really talking about. And if you can be really astute about identifying that, I think it's a lot easier to find a story that people want to hear.
This episode is sponsored by the book marketing experts at Written Word Media. They know that marketing your book can be a challenge, and that's why they make marketing simple by providing quick, easy, and effective ways to promote your books. When you schedule a promotion with Written Word Media, your book is emailed to tens of thousands of readers who love your genre. It's exposure that's hard to find any other way. You can even choose a ready-made promo stack that includes multiple promos over a short period of time to help boost your title's rank on retailers like Amazon. The best part? Scheduling your promo only takes 5 minutes and comes with world-class customer service. Over 30,000 authors trust Written Word Media with their book marketing. See why at writtenwordmedia.com today. Okay, so I really enjoyed reading Daniel's book because of the narrative device, how he used all interviews, cutting them back and forth. Yeah. Have you ever used kind of a more experimental style, like an oral history in your novels, or is there something maybe experimental you'd like to try?
I've done some things I haven't done an entire novel like that, but I've used interviews and things like that as like chapter segments or even an entire chapter here or there. And it's pretty effective. And I think the readers resonate with it too. I think it's, I've actually gotten emails and things that, complimented that as a technique, and you can do some really interesting things with it. If you're, it's a way to start talking about that topic without revealing a bunch of stuff, getting everybody kind of engaged in it, and you establish a character you can establish the character's credibility through that in ways that you might not be able to, like in third person narration. But yeah, I've yet to do a full novel that way, but I'm intrigued by it.
Yeah, definitely. I recently interviewed someone that's coming on in a few weeks that used a device like this and then a conglomeration of other ones that we'll discuss in a future episode. I really liked it. I found it unique and fascinating. It reminded me of almost like World War Z in one way or another, and I really like that. In terms of like me exploring it, I recently in one of my novels have like a little poem that starts every story that sort of relates and sort of doesn't. And I really like kind of exploring in other techniques other than just standard narration, because I think it's fun. Why not?
Yeah. And I've used like media and stuff, which I, like social media posts, news articles, whatever. I think people do that. I was feeling creative in my sci-fi because I was doing like telepathy, so I used colons at the end of the sentences instead of quotation marks. I'm like, oh, I'm so clever. But this made me think like, I would like to maybe try something a little bit different. So, and what you said, Kevin, because I really felt like some of the people in it that were maybe more controversial, like the conspiracy theorists or people who are like glorifying like the white woman syndrome disappearance thing, or people you might like find a little bit more loathsome. I felt it was like a more balanced perspective because it was coming from their own mouth. So I think that might have been what you were talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was cool.
I'm going to do an entire book where the characters only speak using mime. I haven't worked it out yet, but I'm going to get there.
It was a bestseller immediately.
I just recently watched a movie called No One Will Save You. There is maybe one line of dialogue in the entire movie. Just saying. It's a really good movie.
It. That's cool.
There is a Cormac McCarthy's The Road was very experimental in the way they did. It was almost, if I remember right, and I listened to it, which I think was the only way I was ever going to finish that book. But I think it was essentially all dialogue, right? Like but unattributed dialogue, or no, it wasn't. It was. Go ahead, JP.
It's unattributed dialogue, and there's like no chapters or something.
Yeah. It was like one long stream of consciousness, like reading something on Twitter.
Yeah. I didn't find it that difficult to read, though. It wasn't like a Finnegan's Wake type of thing or anything. But it was just
cool.
Different. It was just different. Yeah. So, and I liked it, and I liked kind of how it was interesting how he was fictionalizing true crime while also examining the exploitative parts of it. Do you ever try to incorporate social commentary, not political commentary, Kevin, social commentary into your work?
Shut me down right away.
Boom.
How are we defining social commentary?
I don't know.
What counts as social commentary?
So he was just making a comment on that, true crime, we're kind of addicted to it and we use it as entertainment, but it's also exploitative in some ways, right, of the people who have suffered. So so I don't know, anything that's kind of like, hey, maybe we should take a look at this and what we're doing.
We've always done that, though. It's not like this. It's only new by scale at this point. But, we've always the mainstream media is exactly this, exploiting, these tragedies and things for profit. There, if anything, at least this stands a chance of, a lot of times these things will pay the people who were a part of the story something for the rights. Whereas in mainstream media, it's just, we're just telling the facts. So, we don't owe you anything. It's fascinating, by the way, like Kara, I actually read something fairly recently that was saying that women watch these shows more than men, which I find really interesting. And I enjoy them, but I'm not drawn to them the way my wife Kara is. Like we call it watching murder. I'm going to go watch murder. And then she watches 6 hours of, whatever show is hot on Netflix or something. Like, I do think, by the way, I saw this as a joke today, but I think it's really funny and relevant. But it's like, if someone came to you and said, hey, you want to watch a 10-hour movie? You're like, no way. Like, oh, what if we just broke it up into multiple episodes? Yeah, okay.
And then watch them all.
Why do you have to come at me like that, Kevin? I feel attacked.
Yeah, that was rude.
Because I wasn't allowed to talk about political commentary. So,
have you ever written anything where you've been like afraid how your audience might react to it?
Yes, every time I write anything. JP, you probably have a better answer though.
So obviously, like I currently am focusing on a lot of like queer storytelling, and there is a big hesitation, personal hesitation, and just like how the audience will take that, because when I was first writing it, it wasn't as common, and it's one of those things that you're like, do you want to write this and get the potential hate for it? Because there is a lot of hate for it. It exists. And ultimately I said, you know what? I want these stories told and I will tell them. So that's my approach.
Yeah.
I think I like that, JP. But if no one else has told you, like I don't know what to say. I'm proud of you. That's brave. That actually is brave when you know that, I don't like when people say someone's brave. Half time they don't know what they're talking about. But that is brave when I'm going to write this and I'm going to take crap for it. And you do it anyway because you want the story to be told. And I also think it's, you got to rise above agenda. That's the thing I think tears a lot of story down. Like if the agenda is I'm going to push this, I'm writing a story whether anyone likes it or not, because everyone needs, I hate films that are like that. But if you're doing it because this is a story that needs to be told, and I know I'm going to take crap for it, and you do it anyway, to me, that's a huge positive thing. Anyway, that's an aside.
Yeah, no,
but that,
I agree too. Because like, for example, in one of my pieces, I have a non-binary character. And the entire reason I have a non-binary character is because I myself identify as non-binary and I want to see that representation. I'm not putting it in there to just put it in there and have like, oh, look, everyone, I have this non-binary character.
Yeah.
I put that character in there because I wanted a reflection of what I see in the world. And if I've gotten crap for it because some people just don't want to understand, but I've also had a lot of good come out of that, where people are like, hey, I see myself here. That's awesome. I appreciate you. So you take what you can.
I see a lot of exploitation happen, where they insert a non-binary character or anything in the LGBTQ plus, arena solely for having that in there. Not
like
even
the diversity tick box. I did it.
Well, yeah,
exactly.
That drives me absolutely bananas. Where they're just checking a box, and it's awkward and weird, and it doesn't belong in that story.
And insulting.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, that would be insulting to me.
And not, maybe particularly researched well or,
right.
or done justice to. So, yeah, I think if you're going to do it, just do it well.
Just look at how they represent writers in fiction. Like, you're writers. Have you never met writers? Writers don't do any of these things.
Yes, they do. They turn their manuscript in person and paper to their editor and then go on their yacht. That's what we all do.
Every movie about a novelist that I've seen in the past 20 years is about 40 years out of date in the way they handle publishing.
And going back to true crime, I mean, I don't understand the fascination, but that was my work. It's like, okay, if you're an accountant, do you want to go home and watch a show about accounting? It's like, I understand the fascination. I understand the fascination.
About accounting.
It's like
that's why I loved numbers.
I tell you what, whenever you people are weird. Whenever you put up yellow crime scene tape, no matter what it was like moths to a flame. It was incredible. Even in Wisconsin.
That's why the next time I do a signing, I'm going to surround my little table with crime scene tape.
do that at my signings. I do use yellow crime scene tape.
Yeah, there you go.
But there you go.
Yeah, you actually sent me when you first sent me your first book, you sent it to me wrapped in crime scene tape. I'm going to tell you, I never once unwrapped and opened that book. I just bought a different copy to read because I'm like, I want to keep this in that state forever.
Well, that's my
so I still have it. It's
know what? That's my shtick. For my police procedurals, I always bundled them in crime scene tape. And even the fiction books, I bundle them in crime scene tape. People get a kick out of little stuff like that.
That's fun.
Think outside the crime scene or the crime scene box.
Yeah. So, what I thought was interesting is Daniel's not a true crime writer, but he's true crime adjacent. And, it's a little bit of self-examination. So have you ever taken a jab at yourself while you're writing?
Yes.
Yeah.
Why not? Sure.
Yeah.
I think you can be a little... It's one thing to be self-deprecating. It's another thing to really tear into yourself. I've seen writers do that too. But yeah, I tend to. There's been times when I've kind of written myself into a story a little bit, like not name myself, but I'm doing a Stan Lee bit, kind of in one scene, and I always kind of put myself in a doofus type of scenario, I basically the protagonist notices the bearded guy sitting by himself at one corner of the coffee shop with a too large coffee and crumbs on his shirt, things like that. I'll do that.
I think it all boils down to you just can't take yourself too seriously, otherwise you're gonna be a miserable SOB. You got to have a little bit of fun.
Absolutely. That's always good writing advice. Have fun.
Enjoy the ride.
So, Christine, who do we have up next week?
Up next week, it is Ashley Winstead. Ashley Winstead is the author of In My Dreams, I Hold a Knife, The Last Housewife, Midnight is the Darkest Hour, Fool Me Once, and The Boyfriend Candidate. Her books have been Library Read Picks, Lone Star Picks, Best of Amazon Picks, Best of Apple Picks, and she's received so many starred reviews. I can't even name them all. So her books have been translated into over a dozen languages worldwide and optioned for film and television. So looking forward to talking to Ashley. If you'd like to be notified as soon as new episodes publish, make sure you go to writersincpodcast.com and sign up now. We'll see you next episode and have a great week of writing.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Writers Inc. Access the show notes and leave a comment at writersincpodcast.com.